You're listening to She's the Business podcast.
Okay, and welcome. I'm here with Chynna Benton. I'm so excited to be chatting to you today, Chynna. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. And you are the founder of Byte Bodega. Now, can you tell us what is your business all about? Who do you serve? What do you do? And maybe even a bit about how you got into it, because I'm always curious about that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. I am an online business manager. So at Byte Bodega, myself and my team member really focus on working with creative entrepreneurs specifically. Some people kind of teeter on that definition a little bit, but mostly creatives with everything on the back end of their business. So anything that we can do to help them automate, streamline, and really help them run their business with more intention and with more sustainability so that they don't feel overwhelmed all the time, so they don't feel like they have to do everything themselves, and that they can confidently outsource to their team and manage their team and trust their team to fulfill things on their behalf without having to be the person who is holding the team back from supporting them, right? So that they can move forward in doing that themselves. So that's kind of what we focus on all day, every day, is just organizing things. And it is a ton of fun, at least for me. I know not everybody loves it, but it is like, I just absolutely nerd out on it every day.
You make me laugh because it's like, you're like the cheese to my wine, or whatever you want to call it. Like, it is, for me, I love the vision. I love seeing the vision and being in that creation. And then the actual implementation, I start to lose the will to live. Like, I know that I really need a really good support team, somebody who can do the detail and loves the detail, loves getting into it. So when you say that kind of thing, I'm like, there is a perfect pairing there with so many entrepreneurs, because generally entrepreneurs are kind of visionary, people with ideas people want to make things happen. But the thing is that we need something in the back end to actually drive the machine. Once we've sort of gone, here's the design of what we're creating and let's do this, it's really hard to do it all on your own, because most of us, we're not able to sit in both camps all the time. Like, I can do the detail if I have to. I'll sit down and I'll work through a spreadsheet. It's not what I like to do every day. It's not what I want to be doing with all of my time. And it's probably not what I should be doing either, right? Like, that's the whole thing, is what should we be doing? Now, I had a couple of questions that I wanted to ask you, and I was thinking, which one will I ask first? But maybe just quickly, like, how did you get into this business? How did you decide or discover that you love all of this stuff and that you're really good at it, and the whole online business space? Because I just find that really interesting.
Yeah. And you did ask me this, but I totally skipped over it. So my fault, but so basically I started my business kind of on the side of my day job back in 2017. I worked in the wedding industry. So I helped brides plan their wedding and couples plan their wedding. Yeah. So I was naturally like a detail oriented person, because as one can imagine, couples are very detailed when it comes to their wedding day. So I kind of fell into VA work because I took an online course, and my business kind of like spiraled out of control in a good way. And I quit my job 6 months later to do VA work. And I kind of found in working with my VA clients that I was fulfilling the task. I was being the implementer that a VA is, but I also found that there were points when I would go to the clients and be like, we could make this so much easier if we just did X, Y, and Z. And I kind of found over time that I really, really enjoyed basically looking at the bigger picture of things and not just checking the box off that it was done, but actually looking at it and saying, hey, this is a process that we do every day, every week, every whatever. How can we make it easier, or how can we make it automated so that we don't have to do it anymore? And then I can do more things for you because that's already taken care of, right? Yes. So over time, I kind of learned as I was doing that, that's what I enjoyed a lot. And then I kind of learned about the OBM role and becoming an online business manager, and how basically that's all you do all day in that role, right? And everything kind of came full circle whenever I realized like, oh, like this can be my primary focus and have virtual assistant support, but be that point person for helping people streamline their businesses and help them find the implementer whenever they're fully optimized in every capacity that they can be. So it really just kind of developed since I started in VA work, and it just kind of like slowly grew into what it is today. Yeah.
That is, I can really see that progression. And that's awesome that you really recognize that in yourself as well, that where you're providing the most value is in actually overlooking the whole thing and finding ways that you can streamline and automate. Now, when we're talking about businesses, what level of business or what stage has someone got to by the time they're starting to need to be doing this? What do you think? Are they a couple of years in? Are they 5 years in? Like what? I mean, I know that is how long's a piece of string because everybody's a bit different. But if you were going to put a parameter on it, where do you see people are going to start to get the real value out of this kind of, somebody really looking at the business and doing that streamlining? What kind of factors might they have or be able to recognize in their own business that would be like, okay, you're at the time, you're at the place where it's the right time to start looking?
Yeah, that makes total sense. So there's two kind of key points that come to mind for me with this question. So one being if in the role of a solopreneur. The solopreneur for me is someone who like might have one VA or is completely, I don't want to say like you're alone in your business, but like you're the sole person that's doing everything, right? Those people, that stage of business, I think it's really critical that once you land your first 2 to 3 clients, that's when you're looking at the picture of how can I streamline things? How can I automate things? Because what I see a lot of solopreneurs do is they get their first couple clients, and like whenever you're just getting started, it's really easy to just be like, yeah, clients are booking me. And like, you just kind of like do everything manually and you don't really like take the time to think about how you can make things easier on yourself. And then flash forward 3 months later, because you're awesome in your business, you have a full roster of clients and a full roster of work, and you have no time to dedicate to looking at those systems and looking at those automations. And sometimes it's something as simple as using like Zapier or workflows in your client relationship management platform, like Dubsado or Honeybook or all these popular ones. And then you're kind of past the point where you have time to do that. And if you are past the time to do that, that's okay, because there's experts that specialize in those things that can help you do that. But if you want to do it yourself, it's really critical to do it right whenever you're like first making money. And then otherwise you need to hire help to help you do that. So, yeah.
Because even just takes time to sit down and even think, well, where do I get the time back? What could I automate? And often when you've got your head in all of this stuff that you're meant to be doing, you just don't have the brain space or the vision of the operations side. And maybe it's like, well, I've always done it that way, or that's how things have always been done. And usually I think that's where it's so beneficial to have a fresh perspective coming in and being like, well, did you realize that you don't have to do it that way? Like there's other ways of doing it, which, hey, we don't know what we don't know, do we? So yeah, I can really see that. And I think that that's probably that critical point where if you don't act in the first couple of clients and actually start putting, go, okay, this is working, great. I can see that what I've put out there, this is great. Now, really quickly, before I get booked up, I need to spend that time putting the processes in, or I need to bring someone in to help me with the processes before it gets out of control, because you can throw yourself under the bus otherwise, right? You like,
absolutely.
Yeah. And I think, one thing that popped up for me, which I do see a lot of people who are conscious of this, they might actually be starting to work on all the processes before getting their clients. And I tend to say to my clients, I'm like, look, just try it out first. You don't need to have all the systems in place. You don't need to have all the processes. You just need to know what you're going to do if this happens. Like put something out there. If someone bites, great. You just need to know what your next step is. You don't need to have it already done unless you think it's going to take you a really long time. But if you're like, well, I can put together that next email within a suitable amount of time. It's going to still be a good experience. How you can build your stuff as you go. I love to really leverage time and not to waste time. So creating something for something that may or may not work, to me, would be a waste of time. So I love that idea, but it's like you really need to be thinking about it at the same time as you're doing it, as you say, otherwise you could get completely out of control.
Yeah. And I totally agree. And that's why I advocate for waiting at least until you fulfill your services for at least 3 to 5 clients before you really dive into automations and stuff, because your process will probably change by your 5th client. You're going to notice things, and like, this is getting into your wheelhouse now, right? But like this is like, you're going to see like, oh, every client asked me this question at this point in my process. And that's something that whenever you go to set up your automations, you can address that, but you won't see that from client 1, and it'll help you map that out to build those things later. So yeah, fully agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what are the common things when you start working with somebody? What are those common things that you see them doing manually that you're like, wow, this is the low-hanging fruit. We can get that off your plate right now. Like, what are those ones that you see? Because I'm sure that you see patterns with your clients, like we see patterns with ours as well. But what are those ones that you love to dive in and that can really shift the needle for them early on?
Yeah. So a lot of things for the smaller entrepreneur is things like sending invoices and sending contracts and sending inquiry response emails. So all of those things that you do at the same time for every single client at every point in the process, those are things that you can automate. So those like very repeatable, recurring things, like those things that I mentioned, are easily things that you can put automations in place for. And you should be able to essentially never send another invoice if you know how to set it up properly. Like, I don't do invoicing in my business because it just all does it for me. And it's crazy to me that like, you know, there are business owners that are like, oh my gosh, you know, like I sent my invoice 3 weeks late because I just forgot, you know, and it's totally normal because we're busy, and it's totally understandable. But, you know, it's just one of those things that you can trust the platforms that you're probably already paying for, frankly, to do it for you, and just like never think about it again and know it's done. So it's those sorts of things.
Yeah, that is a huge one for me. I think I personally have a really big aversion to finances or managing them, because I'm like, I mean, money. I love money. I love being paid. It's all awesome. But when I started this business, I was just like, I do not want to spend my time sending invoices, chasing up invoices that aren't paid. Like, I do not even want to spend a minute doing that. That would just absolutely kill me, because I do not love it at all. And I think that was why I actually designed my services the way that I did, was like, you know, it's all done online. They pay up front. It's automatic payments. The invoicing comes out, or receipts come out from the system. There are no invoices. I'm never chasing one up, and there are never any unpaid ones. And I'm like, perfect. I spend 0 time doing that. So, perfect. You know, and I know that for some creatives, so, you know, they might be sitting there going, oh, but my business doesn't work that way. I've got different price points for each client. And obviously then you might invoice at different times during a project. And yeah, I know, like I haven't been the creative agency myself, but I've worked with so many of them on the client side. I've been the client and they've been working with me. And my challenge and what I've done for a lot of clients is just like, well, there are different ways of doing it. And you can actually systemize and process the way that you build your service packaging and when you invoice and how you invoice, so that, like Chynna is saying here, you can actually put it into your system, and then your system can automate the invoices for you. Like, the more you customize it and the more you try to make it exactly for each client, you know, and like, well, this project's stretching out and we have, you know, the time frames have extended, so I can't send that invoice yet. It's like, no, you just make it in your terms and conditions up front. This is how it happens. This is when it's going to be. They sign into it. And guess what? Them paying that invoice before they've actually got to that point gives them a great big push up the ass to get moving, get their feedback to you, get that project underway, because, you know, they are then thinking, well, they're putting the money in, right? So they actually want it to progress when they are not paying, and they're just sitting there like, oh yeah, I'll get that feedback done soon. That's not my top priority, and it extends and extends. So yeah, I'm going into a whole big tangent there, but I just thought this is a really good time to put that in there of like, hey, it doesn't always have to be done the way that it has been done before. You know, looking at even how you want to structure your services and offer them, like that whole strategy behind the service offering then leads into what you can do in the back end and actually reducing all your admin time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And those are all kinds of things that like you can work with a specialist who knows your platforms that you use inside and out. Like there's Dubsado specialists, there's Honeybook specialists, there's Asana, ClickUp, all those people. And they can help you through that. You know, like those people are there for a reason because they know like there's a reason why I work with creatives, right? Because they're like, I just want to design stuff. I don't want to think about how to send an invoice. You know, like I don't like that's not your wheelhouse for a reason. And there's people out there that are excited and happy to help you organize it. And there are also people out. This is kind of what I'm trying to get at, my brain. But whenever you max out the automations that you can implement in your business for those types of things like invoicing and sending your contracts and your proposals and all that good stuff. So there's this whole other pillar of your business once you kind of max out those automations that you still need support, right? There are certain things that you just straight up can't automate, and that's okay. That's normal. But there are people like virtual assistants, and we kind of touched on this in like my backstory, right? Of doing things like drafting your blog posts for you, or even just scheduling your blog posts for you. Podcast editing. You have a podcast editor. They help you immensely, right? Like there's things that you just simply can't use a platform for, and you need another skilled human in order to support you to do those things. And those people are there for you too. It's just about identifying what it is that you want to outsource and finding the person that can help you do that. So there's kind of two main areas where you kind of have to think about like, am I outsourcing this to a platform, or am I outsourcing this to a human person who can help me?
Yes, exactly. Because some things actually have to be done by a human. And yeah, I think you made a really good point there. You know, for example, the podcast, there's quite a lot of work that goes into editing the episodes and, you know, putting the pieces together, intros and whatever else. And that was something that I knew, well, hey, I could probably do it. Like there's technology out there that's editing platforms. Like I can learn it. I'm pretty tech savvy. I know I could do all of that, and I can record it. I could produce my own podcast, but do I really want to do that? Is it what I really want to spend my time doing? And, you know, when I started this, obviously I was at a stage in my business where I was really strict on what I should be doing and what I should not be doing. And I knew that learning how to edit podcasts and do all of that stuff was not what I should be doing because, you know, I could be spending my time on things that are way more revenue generating, can actually bring in the money to pay for that person to do it for me. And I know that this is a really hard thing for so many people, is like, when do you get to that point where you're like, well, it's not worth my time doing it? And I think a lot of people probably struggle because we're brought up to be so self-sufficient. We're brought up to be, you know, and when we're in a job, they're like, you know, it's great, learn a new skill. Like it's always about you expanding and learning new skills. But when you come into business, like that kind of mentality of I'm going to learn how to do it and I'm going to do it, it actually means that you end up slowing down, because as your business grows, there are more and more and more things that get added in. And if you're doing them all, then the amount of time you've got left to actually do the work that brings in the money is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And so what do you say, like, when is that time that people should maybe recognize that it's time to outsource? Like, how do you know when it's the right time, do you think? Yeah, I guess because that's probably the question that everybody has, and it's the scary one. I know for so many, it's been really hard.
Yeah, it's a question that I get asked a lot, honestly, because I think everybody has that challenge, right? And understanding, when you need to outsource and when you need to hire that human person to help you. And I think people put it off a lot because it is a big investment, especially as a smaller business owner. It's normal for your outsourcing for your team to be your biggest expense, right? So with that being said, there is a time when you reach in your business, and this is different for everyone. And I'm sorry that I don't have a clear answer, but because everybody wants it to be black and white, but it's just not. But I really think that it is whenever you reach a point where you cannot serve any more clients to make any more money because you are maintaining all of these other things as you are maintaining those clients. Or students, depending on your business model. But once you reach a point where you're like, okay, my absolute cap is I work with 4 clients a month and I'm already working 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, whatever it is. And or even 20 hours a week. Maybe you don't want to work 20 hours a week and you only want to work 15, whatever, right? Yeah. But once you reach that point where you're like, I can't take on anymore, that's when you need to outsource, because now we're talking about you're limiting your revenue because you just don't want to outsource your podcast, right? Or because you don't want to outsource your blog post writing or whatever those things are that you could easily trust to someone who is incredible at it so that you can take on that 5th client every month. And maybe you spend, I don't know, let's just say $600 a month on that support person, but you can book a $2,000 one-on-one client. You already made, what is that? Math isn't my strong suit, $1,400 a month extra, right? So you really have to look at it from a data-driven decision of if I outsource this much, what am I going to gain? How much more money can I make to offset that? And once you reach that point where you're you can confidently say to yourself, yes, me handing this off is going to allow me to expand what it is that I'm doing. That's the pinnacle point that you need to recognize. And like I said, I wish that I could be it is 3 months in, that's when you need to outsource.
No, but I think that's a perfect description, right? Because we all know when we get to that point where you can't do anymore, where you're I'm maxed out. I'm maxed the time and I'm probably not even doing as much as what I should be doing. There's all this stuff I'm never getting done. It's starting to look like a mess behind the scenes. It might look okay on the outside, but behind that curtain, it's oh my God, the whole place is an absolute jumble. I think we all know when you've got to that point, and, some of us may have already started to outsource, but I think if you got to that point and you can't make any more money because you've got no more time to bring in any more clients, then that is the time that you start going, well, what are the low level tasks that are not worth my hourly rate, but that are worth someone else's hourly rate to do? Because anything that you do, then you're gaining, like Chynna said, I think that there's a whole thing, a lot of the time we automatically think that means that we're making less. I used to be making $100 an hour, but now if I'm spending $20 an hour to hire someone, it means I'm only making $80 an hour. It's no, but you're actually gaining the ability to make more, because some of those hours that you were doing before, you were doing in the back end of your business where you're not earning any money. You're now turning those hours into earning hours. So instead of making 0, you can now make 80. And that's better than 0. So it's a real shift in how you think about the money. And, I really have gone even a step further, and I love to challenge people to do this, is stop thinking about your business as you as an employee on an hourly rate, because that is the real one thing that's holding you back and often is stopping you from outsourcing and being able to make more money, is because you're thinking, it's cutting down what I'm earning, it's taking away my earnings and giving it to someone else. It's absolutely not. You now have a business. So what you're doing when you're getting clients and you're charging them is you making money for the business. The business is then spending money on people or technology to help you make more. It's not connected in that way. There's income and there's expense. And when you can separate the two out and think, how can I make more? Well, I need to be able to have more clients, then I need to free up the time. And I'd rather pay $20 to be able to make 80 than continue in this place where I'm just stuck at that plateau. And it's because you've been able to separate the earning from the outgoing and seeing that the outgoing is actually not an outgoing at all. It's an investment in you being able to make more. So it's investing a little bit to make 4 times that often, or maybe even more. Like the more you can separate those two, just the more possibilities open up for you.
Absolutely. And I think that ultimately, if you give yourself even like a chunk of time to test it, what I would bet that you would find that 3 months after you hire that support, you're going to be able to look at the picture of your business as you're describing and see like, oh, that extra client or 2 extra clients that I can book every month, like my revenue went up 20% and I only spend $500 a month on this expense that I brought on, like that it's a given. It's a very obvious decision whenever you simplify it the way that you're describing and looking at it from a business point of view rather than this opportunity for expansion rather than this like, well, that's going to cost me money, right? Because it's a shift in perspective, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other big things, that's probably the one, I reckon, the biggest thing that stops people from outsourcing because they feel like it's taking away what they're earning. And it's like, okay, it's not. It's actually helping you be able to earn more. But the other one is fear about the person. Like, can someone else do this as well as me? Can I really hand it over to them? Are they going to blow up my business? Like, I guess it depends on what you're outsourcing to. But, there's a lot of risk and fear, I think, in that bringing in someone into your business when it's only been you can be a really scary step because it feels very intimate. And I guess there's that whole trust thing. So what's your advice in, how do you kind of work through that? How can we shift and change that perspective? And then what do you look for in a person so that you know that they're going to be the right fit for you?
Yeah. So I just want to acknowledge anybody in your community that's listening to this, that if this is how you feel, everyone feels this way whenever they're talking about their first hire. Literally everyone. Even whenever I was a VA, people would come to me and they're like, I'm really nervous about hiring somebody, but like, I know I need to. And like, everyone's kind of in that place when they get started. And if you're not, I am applauding you from over here, but chances are you're with everyone else in this bigger boat. So with that being said, I really encourage you to consider, if you're in this place, to think about how you can serve your community and your clients better with more support. Because whenever you back up for a minute and think about like, does it take you 2 or 3 days to answer an email because you're so overwhelmed and like mentally drained that you can't get back to your clients within a certain amount of time? Are you missing leads coming through your inbox because you're not responding to them or you're missing them? Are you forgetting to send your invoice and then, you don't get paid in time? Those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. That can give you, or this person can give you the time and space to serve your clients even better than you can potentially serve them by yourself, right? You can free up time and space, whether it's through those admin tasks or just by you not having to think about those admin tasks anymore. You now have the time, space, and energy to dedicate to your clients, even if they're not client facing, right? Like, that's a whole different conversation, but like literally just them handling the things that your clients never see for you, so that whenever you are on a call with someone, you are fully there and you're not thinking like, oh crap, as soon as I get off this, I have like 85 emails I have to answer, and you're distracted, right? You have all these things going on in the back of your brain, like we all do. But as soon as you release yourself from that, imagine how much clearer minded you can show up to serve your clients and how much better you can you can grow your business as a result, because they're going to feel that, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
really encourage you to think about not just like the fear of trusting them, but the opportunity that you can have to grow as a result of trusting them. Does that make sense?
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, some of the challenges that I see people have, and, I've certainly experienced them as well before myself. Luckily, with my business, I'd already been in the corporate world and had hired so many people for my own team, and also, contractors and agencies that I was very used to outsourcing when I started my business, and I was doing that straight away. But, I know for a lot of people, it's kind of the first time you're doing it. And what I guess for me, the biggest thing, and, I'd love to hear if you've got an even bigger one or a better tip. It is really about being super, super clear with that person. So a lot of this fear around, well, I can't trust them to do, take over my social media or to do my accounts. All you need to do is be really, really clear on your expectations of what this is, what they do, and what success looks like to you. So for them, they might be already working with other people on social media or whatever it is that you're asking them to do. And they might have a different version of what they need. So don't just assume that they're going to have in their head the exact same thing that you have in your head when you start out. You need to be really clear, like, this is how I want you to do it. And this is what success looks like to me. So when you've done this by this time, and it's got these things included, that is going to tick the box for me. That's going to put the smile on my face, and that's going to be amazing. If you don't communicate that, then there's this huge gap between what you're expecting. And so there's this huge disconnect between what you think it is, what success looks like, and what your expectation is, and what they probably have as their preconceived idea of how they should be doing their job based on how they've done it in the past or who they've worked for in the past, and maybe what they had asked them to do. So the communication is the number one key to success. And also then that means that, this whole fear of the trust and all of these horror stories that you hear of people like, I hired someone to do this and they did something completely different. It's like, well, that is down to the communication. And unfortunately, as the business owner, we have to stand up. We got to take responsibility. If they didn't do what we wanted, it's our fault. 99% of the time, we didn't communicate it effectively. And that can be a hard pill to swallow. So sorry if that's triggered anybody, or if you're like, wow, I had someone who just totally didn't do what I asked. Like, well, they probably didn't get it. If they didn't do as you asked, and they had the right skills, they actually had the skills to do it, then they didn't understand. So there was something lacking there. And it's a really good question to go back and go, well, how could I have communicated that better? What did I miss? What didn't I explain to them? Or what did I kind of have in my head that never came out? Because that is really, I think, what I've seen people like hire, then have a disastrous experience, then go, I'm never hiring anyone else again, then retreat back into, I'm doing it all myself. I'm the person with many, many hats on my head. That is going to, really keep you stuck in that place. So it's like actually going, hey, that's okay. I had a bad experience. That doesn't mean that every experience is going to be that way. And that may have been a disconnect between you and the person. Maybe it wasn't the right fit, but 9 times out of 10, if you felt like it was a good fit, it was probably down to that communication. What do you have to say about that, Chynna? I know I've just gone on a huge big rant, but I feel really passionately about it. I've had a lot of challenges with this myself. I've definitely not communicated properly at times. And I have learned that lesson over and over and over again. So I'm just trying to, really impart it. But what do you say? Like, how do you see who's a good fit? What other things can you do even before you get to the point of briefing that would help someone make the right choice about who that person is?
Yeah. So I just want to agree with you completely in everything you were saying, because I fully agree. And this is something that I talk about a lot in my education resources, that like, and especially with a lot of my clients, and that like, if you are not giving your team the tools that they need to succeed, that's on you. Like ultimately if you say to someone, I want you to write 1 blog post a week, well, I could write a blog post that's 200 words and 10 images, or I could write one that's 3,000 words and 0 images. And unless you tell me, like, it's just a really concrete example, right? Like,
exactly. Yeah.
If you don't tell me what it is that you want, there's no way for me to read your mind and ultimately know. So having those resources, and like, I'm an OBM, so I'm all like operations and procedures, right? So like, standard operating procedures is something that I highly, highly, highly recommend that everyone put in place, whether you have one VA for 5 hours a week or 10 team members with 25 hours a week. You know, that is really your tool to give them that step-by-step direction and the information that they need in order to fulfill those tasks for you exactly the way that you're describing.
And that doesn't have to be hard either. I know that, you know, for people who are like, maybe a little bit like me, busy, and I'm like, standard operating procedure, I start going, I want to stick my fingers in my ears and run a mile. But just think about, well, how could I make that easy? How could I give the direction in a way that's easy for me? And something I love to do for my team is literally put on Loom and just record in under 5 minutes. Sometimes it's 2 minutes. This is what I want you to do. This is how you do it. So this is something we do regularly. This is how I want you to set up. You know, if it's like setting up a new offer in Kajabi, there are things that I want in there. There's stuff I want to tag. I want it connected to Active Campaign. I want, you know, this is how you do it. And then it's done. And it literally took me 2 minutes. This is not like me sit down for half an hour and write it out step by step, because that would kill my energy and my time. I don't have time for that. I'm not doing it. But they can turn on that video anytime they want and go through it. And, you know, maybe that's not perfect, but it's better than not having it at all. So, you know, I just like you to just think creatively about it. Like, this doesn't have to be hard at all. It's just about how can we be clear? How can we give them the best description of what it is that we really want?
But to answer your question, because I had to comment on what you were saying, because it was too good. And I could talk about that until I'm blue in the face. But so you asked me about what it is to look for in someone whenever you are looking for the person that you want to hire. So I'm really big on soft skills versus hard skills, right? A lot of what we see in job posts for virtual assistants and similar roles in the online space are like, have you ever heard the term of a unicorn VA, which is... Have you heard of this? Yes, exactly. It's I need my perfect go-to person that can do literally everything under the sun and knows every platform and everything. And ultimately, like, you're never going to find someone that can fit literally everything. And frankly, you don't even want that person. You want somebody that can like specialize in the thing that, you know, you do, or that you want them to be focusing on. So with that being said, you know, don't focus on the hard skills. Like, it's not wrong to say like, hey, these are the platforms that I use in my business. If you're familiar with them, great, but it's not a make or break thing, or it shouldn't be a make or break thing, in my opinion. I think you should more so focus on finding someone who matches your personality, matches your brand voice, matches your ideals and your mission behind your business, so that you know that they are fully behind you in what it is that you're working towards, right? Because listen, I can turn on a Loom video, like you were saying, and teach somebody how to tag a email address in ConvertKit in 10 minutes. That's trainable. That is a hard skill. But I cannot teach someone how to be excited whenever a new student joins my course, or a new client had a breakthrough in working with me one-on-one, or something like that, right? Like, I can't teach someone to do that. So I really, really encourage everybody, whenever they're hiring their person, whatever role it is, to really focus on finding someone who is genuinely excited and expresses that excitement about your business and about what you do, that they show that they did their research, they looked at your website, and they know what it is that you do whenever you talk to them, you know, and they have the the desire to learn. Even if they don't have those hard skills, they want to learn from you and they want to grow with you. So that's really what I would tell you to kind of move forward with. And just at the end of the day, like, follow your gut. Like, I know that everybody hates that answer, but if you get on a call and you feel good and you're like, yes, this is my person, like they get me, you know, like that's a really good sign. If you get off and you're kind of like, meh, I don't know, like that was weird. Well, then you should listen to that too, you know? So all of those things are really, really important through the process.
I think you touched on something that I'd love to highlight, because I think this is actually super important. And it was about the unicorn thing. And instead of finding someone who is good at everything, to actually be really clear about what the specialization is and hire for the specialization. Because anyone who's actually saying they're good at everything is lying to begin with. There is no such thing.
Yes.
Like, trust me, been there, done that. I always would ask an agency, tell me what you'd win an award for. Like, seriously, I don't want to know that you do everything, because you might, but it doesn't mean you do everything well. I want what you do really well, because that is where your highest value is. And every VA is going to have an area that they really do well, that they are a specialist in. And I guess the way that I would think about it is, as a business owner, when you start out, you're wearing all of the hats. So your job is not the business. It is not one thing, and you're not cutting off bits. You're actually wearing a whole stack of hats when you begin, because you're doing it all. Each one of them is different. And you can't just go, okay, I'm now just going to do my work and I'm going to transfer the whole stack of hats onto a VA. Like, that's really unlikely to be successful. Often what happens, you know, some people may have a VA that does lots of things for them, but generally it starts off with one. And then you find, oh, they've actually got some skills here, or they're working really well. We add and add and add. And so they might end up with a few hats, but you tend to want to start off with just one in mind and be hiring for that one. Like, what is the main thing I want to get off my plate right now that is going to make a big impact for me, because it's not my core competency. It's not what I should be doing or spending my time on. Hire for that. And if there is a fit with some of the other hats, great, because you could do that, but just start with one. Like, make it easy for yourself, because when you hire for a specialist, you're getting a much better output, a much better fit for what you need than trying to find someone who sort of meets a whole lot of criteria, because you're going to find out, well, that's going to get very frustrating then when they're trying to deliver and they're not doing anything particularly well. Then you just sit back in that place of like, oh, I should never have outsourced. So generally that's kind of what's going on. And, you know, what do you say, because you're now an OBM. So do you take that role in with your clients' businesses where you're managing the VAs as well? Like, how does it work? Yeah, just
in terms of hiring VAs, like, do I hire VAs for clients? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Do you hire and manage them? Like, because the OBM, essentially what you do now is like sitting at that level, kind of in between the business owner and, you know, if they've got more of a team. But maybe, I mean, some people may not be as familiar with what that OBM role really is, or what the difference is between that and a VA. So I guess to add that clarity for anyone who's got that question.
Yeah. So essentially, as an OBM, I sit between the team and the business owner. I always like to say, like, I am the business owner's partner in everything that it is that they do. So generally, whenever I start working with a business owner, they probably have at least 3 to 5 team members on their team already. And they are going through the motions of managing that team whenever they bring me on. But then I step into that role of managing the team and managing the project so that they no longer have to do that. So every time your team member comes to you and says, hey, I need you to review this and approve it so I know that I can post it, that's no longer the business owner. That's me now. And whenever we talk about filming looms and creating SOPs and outlining projects for your next launch or those sorts of things, like, now that is my role rather than the business owner's role. So the VA would be answering to me and I am answering to the business owner in the structure where it is that I'm in place. And yes, I would hire contractors and team members for my business owners and my clients whenever that point may or may not come up. So if we find that for whatever reason, we want to launch a podcast because we never had one before and we need a podcast editor, like that would be something that I would support them with. So this whole hiring process that we're talking about is something that I go through all the time, but just on the behalf of my clients, right? So I do a lot of this, like looking at the hard skills versus the soft skills and like the specialist versus the generalist and all of these things that we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. There's just so much in that. I think we could talk about it for ages. I love all of this stuff because to me, like streamlining business is number one. What do you call it? I mean, if you don't have that, then you end up just working so much more than you need to. And for me, business is so that I could have the life that I wanted. Like less work, more life is a hashtag I love to use on a lot of my social media because it's why I'm doing this. Otherwise, I could go and sit in an office and work, 40 hours a week and build someone else's dream. But I want to have my dream and I don't want to be spending all of my day doing it. I actually want to be enjoying my life and being in control. So I think the only way you can do that is streamlining. And it means, having somebody or having some things in the back end, systems and people that mean that you're not spending all of your time in the operations that, really quickly grows. So thanks so much for sharing all of that wisdom. Do you have any final thoughts or tips, a little nugget that you wanted to give to the audience before we sign off for today?
I think just if you're listening to this conversation and you're still kind of in that, like, I don't know if I can trust someone. I don't think that I'd be able to find that person for me. You might be able to find that person, but like, I don't know how to hire somebody and I don't really feel confident in that process, or I don't know how to make an SOP or any of these things that, we talked about. Just know that there are people out there who want to support you in your dream and support you in building that lifestyle that you were just talking about. Like there are people who like passionately want to see you succeed and want to help you do that. And if you are looking for that person and those people exist, you will find success with outsourcing. It's not as complicated as it feels. There's a lot of technicalities and a lot of things that like we can dive into, and like we were saying, we can talk about this forever, right? But ultimately, like just know at the end of the day that there are people that want to help you and they're excited to help you. You just have to go out there and find them, and they want to find you too. So they'll be there waiting to hear from you. Yeah. So just trust yourself and trust the process and you will find success.
Yeah. And it's never too late to start, you might be like, oh, well, I've got to this point and it's just how it is. It's never too late. It's never too early really either. And I think once you're up and running and you're going, then that's when you can start thinking, what's the first hat I can take off my head?
Exactly.
And yeah, there are some easy questions that you can ask, even if you're like, I don't even know what I should outsource first. Well, that's a good question to ask yourself because your subconscious knows. What do you not want to be doing? Ask yourself that and then just wait for the answer to appear because it will, without you sitting there, feeling frustrated or trying really hard to work it out. You will know deep down what that thing is that you really should be getting off your plate.
Absolutely. We all have the things that we dread doing. And as soon as you feel that dread, that's a surefire sign.
Yeah, absolutely. If it saps your energy and you don't want to be doing it, then that is one of the things that you should be looking at first. For absolute sure.
Exactly.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Chynna. Now, if people want to connect with you, because I know that you are active on your Instagram, how can people find you? Where can they connect if they want to learn a bit more and even, chat more about the OBM piece? Because I know we've kind of covered a lot about initial outsourcing and what you do. You come in, when people have already got a couple of team members or at that point where they're needing to grow them. And there's a whole heap we could have talked about there as well. Like, what's happening in the business back end? Well, how do we get it under control? But people have questions. Where can they best connect with you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Byte_Bodega. That's Byte as in megabyte. And I am at bytebodega.com as well. And there's lots of blog posts and good stuff there. And you can see me dancing around on Instagram Reels if you go and find me there as well. So you can connect with me wherever on either one of those. And that's where I hang out the most.
Awesome. I'll hook all that up in the show notes so that you can find that easily. Just click through and you can find Chynna on her socials or her website. So thank you. Thanks so much, Chynna. Appreciate your time sharing so much with us today. It's been a really, really interesting chat.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. And I'm so excited to hear about how everybody outsources as a result.
Yes. Let us know. Like, drop into the DMs. If you see us post this episode, tell us how you're getting on with your outsourcing. Like, we love to know any feedback that you've got as well about what you find difficult. We'd love to hear it. So hopefully this episode has been helpful and to help you think about some things in a different way. And we would love to hear if that has made a change to you as well. So thank you.
Thank you.